Let me talk to you about environmental education. And what I'm going to talk to you about, well, can probably shed a bit of light on what you shall be doing in creation care ministry with your church. So much of what I learned to start off with was with this magnificent professor called Lucie Sauvé. She's professor at UQAM, Université du Québec à Montréal, and she's an expert on environmental education. She founded the chair for research in environmental education in Montreal. In French, the acronym is ERE. It kind of translates into education related to the environment, or education in relation to the environment. And then I got involved in Planétaire, which is an international group of French-speaking countries on environmental education. I'm also registered in the Canadian Network for Environmental Education and Communication, and you can also look up Learning for a Sustainable Future. So these are really interesting because I see the most latest research and different models and different ways of thinking about the environment, different strategies, different approaches. And then it helps with the innovation of different activities to help people in their relation to the environment. And this actually brings me to a definition of what environmental education is. It's to accompany a person in learning about the relationship they have with their local, regional, and global surroundings. Okay, so environmental education is different from math or English class or biology or any other topic you might think of, where we usually share some information, we share knowledge about something. But for environmental education, it's that middle part that's really important. The relationship they have with their environment. So it's a step in the right direction to gather a bunch of people and explain biodiversity loss. But it's even better to have in mind to prepare an activity where people can make a few steps for a better relationship with their environment. Okay? Sometimes it's just asking the question like, after knowing this, what will you do differently? Or giving time for people to appreciate more than just learning. Okay, so environmental education has a very different aim. We're aiming at a better relationship with the environment. And here are a few models. We have here the Sustainable Development Goals. It's been developed by UNESCO, and there are 17 goals. If you haven't heard about them, I do invite you to go search. And maybe in your church you can invite someone who knows these goals and can explain them to lots of other people. And it's quite amazing from an international point of view how we are improving on certain points, and the quality of life is getting better because we have these goals and we're measuring them. Sustainable development, this is the typical model, okay? So let me go through it. You have 3 spheres: environment, economic, and social. Okay? So let's say you're an urban planner and there's a field somewhere and it's time to develop. What's the typical way we've been acting? Well, we just call up a bunch of developers, see who has the most interesting project, and you have a bunch of houses, usually that are close together. You get a higher taxes that come in, city's happy, and close deal. Obviously, if we're just thinking of the economic aspect, that's the cause of lots of the problems we have. So let's say we integrate the social aspect. Okay, so these are not just future taxes that are here, these are people. So how can we improve the quality of life of these people? In the middle of that neighborhood, should we have a community center? Hey, we plan for that. Should we have a place where people can practice sports? Okay, like a soccer field. Maybe we could have, you know, other things that promote social well-being. Maybe we could build some big housing and some smaller apartments. So there's a mixture of different social strata, and that's for the benefit of all. Um, maybe a restaurant there or a few. And so we're thinking about all the social aspects. So now it's just not economic, it's also the social aspects that are there. Okay, and finally, then we integrate also the environment, which we have forgotten for so long. So then what happens? We have a park in the middle with lots of vegetation and also maybe a depression there. So when there's lots of water that comes all of a sudden, big showers, well then the water can be accumulated and then will seep into the soil from there, rather than putting too much pressure on the city sewers. And yeah, so lots of trees, so the air is pure. Maybe we can already think that these future buildings, they have to integrate a green roof and or solar panels. What about public transit? Has to go through that neighborhood. Maybe enough places for bicycle paths, promote walking through there. So see, we went from only economic to economic and social, and then integrating the environment. It's so sustainable development, this model here you see on the screen, was developed mostly for the people in economy, the developers, to have in mind those other spheres. It was truly a step in the right direction. But then some people, mostly who have a ecology background, or even, I dare say, the natives, would look at this and say, well, that's not how the world works. And then they would say, well, what do you mean? Well, then tell me why economy is outside of the social bubble. Because the whole economy, the whole rules are invented by humans, and it's a part of society. So if you think it's outside of society, you're actually giving it so much value that it's defined by itself. But it's not. It's part of society. An economy has to grow within the acceptable social limits and social justice. And then society itself, all of the things it dreams of, should not go beyond the environmental limits. And so I'm drawing a very different picture. And here's what I get. So the economy is a circle within society, which is a circle within the environment. It's the bullseye model. It's a target in a certain way. Okay? So me personally, that's the model I prefer. And it's still related to sustainable development. Sometimes we talk about a viable future when we talk about this model. It's something to reflect upon. If ever you're explaining what sustainable development is, maybe choose this one instead. When we go in South America, we hear the expression buen vivir, which is living well. And there's one interesting model, which is kind of like a cycle here, you see. Let me go through it with you. So let's say you improve the governance. There's more participation. People can talk to their elected officials, and they listen. And so we're creating laws which help people out, and then it creates more well-being. And when you don't have so many disparities, when you don't have a huge fringe of the population that's suffering from poverty, well, then there's more well-being, and it gives place to more creativity. Okay? Historically, when we see different societies where we took care well of the poor and there was a better sense of well-being. There was more creativity, more artists, and it just shows that people were happier. And then that kind of opens the scope to then taking care of the environment and a bigger ecological awareness. And when you're ready to respect the limits of the environment and you know what's happening in your environment, well then it's easier to coexist. In Spanish they say convivencia. And that leads to better peace and security. And that means we trust our elected officials better, and there's better governance, and then it goes around the cycle like that. And it's said that this buen vivir model, this way of thinking, was inspired from the natives who are in the Andes in Western South America. And it's called sumak kausai. And we have 4 verbs here. And it's when we consider these 4 verbs that there's this sense of well-being, of living well. So obviously we want to have certain things. We need to know certain things. We must be enabled for certain things. We must have power on certain things. And then we do want. But the wants here actually refer to virtuous wants, like a good environment and peace and security and tackling poverty and things like that. That type of want. Okay, so what I'm dreaming of for a better society, what I really want. So yeah, these are interesting models that you might want to read upon. Buen vivir, sumak kasai, and I mean, there's no problem from a Christian point of view, and actually, they might even enlighten what you might understand from a better way of living when we read in the book of Revelation, or when Jesus announces, the new creation. Maybe it'll look something like this. And finally, I'll finish with one last model, which is called One Health. This is promoted by the World Health Organization. And the COVID-19 pandemic is actually a great example of this. Now, what happened in China could have happened in any other country. Like Ebola, for example, was, appeared in Africa. And it could be in your own neighborhood that another pandemic might start. So we shouldn't be too harsh with China on that aspect. But here's what's been happening. Cutting more and more wild spaces brings humanity closer to other animals, other animal populations that we haven't been close to. And then those animals, they're in smaller numbers, they're stressed, they don't get all the food they need, and so they get sicker easier. Also, when you take some of those animals and put them in cages close to one another, their stress levels go up and their immunity goes down, and then they get sick. And then if humans are in contact with them, and if we put them in cages because we want to be in contact with them and use them, well then some of those illnesses, viruses, microbes, can go from animal to human. So here you have a good example of, we can build hospitals and do a bunch of things for human health, but if we don't take care of environmental health and animal health, it'll have an impact on us as well. Okay, so there was first environmental degradation, then we're closer to the wild species, we haven't been taking care of animal health, and now it has a huge impact on us. There's a pandemic. So One Health is another model you can look into. And all of these that I explained, you can probably invite a speaker to talk about these. You can read up on them, and it can become great inspiration to do environmental education.